Hello, welcome to the Omnivorous Bookworm. My name is Lauren, and I wanted to do a series of videos on the Barsetshire series. So we're going to go back to the beginning and start with the Warden. So the Warden is the number one in the series. It's the shortest. It's about 204 pages, so it's pretty short. It was published in 1855, and it's set in Barchester. So like there's Barchester, and then there's Barsetshire around in the surrounding areas. And Barchester is a cathedral town, so we have a lot of the like upper class clergy in Barchester, which is interesting. Um, and some people say that it's not their favorite. I mean, I like Barchester Towers more, but I definitely do enjoy the Warden. It's pretty short. Maybe if it had been longer, I would have had more problems with it. But in Barchester, in the Warden, we follow Septimus Harding, which is it's like a great name. I don't know. I just love his name. And he's older, and he's been working as a clergyman at this. They call it a hospital, but it's more like a sort of nursing home, like assisted living facility for these older people, because there was this guy Hiram who, when he died, he left this place in his will for these older people, older men, and so he has provided for them. And I think there's 12 of them, and they get chosen. And these men come from like the lower classes. And then Harding's job is to like be their spiritual advisor, help them, he goes above and beyond. He actually does physically help them when they're sick and things like that, but he's not required to do that. And they call it Hiram's Hospital. And he's been working there, or he's been appointed to be there for years and years and years. He has a house there. He's a widower. He has two adult daughters. His older daughter, Susan, is married to Lord Grantley, who is the archdeacon and the son of the bishop. So he is very important. I believe it was not the archbishop. I forget. I get them confused. Yeah. Son of the bishop. Yeah. So he's son of the bishop. I guess archbishop would be not in Barchester. So, yeah. And so his younger daughter, Eleanor, is not married. She lives with her father. She helps him at this hospital. They call it a hospital, but it's, like I said, it's more like an assisted living facility, although people do get sick. Like some of the men do get sick when they're there. And then there becomes this sort of controversy, because over the years, this land that was left in the will by Hiram, um, it has given different amounts of money at different times. And so there were times when the land wasn't producing a lot of money, and they still gave the men the same amount of money. So even when it wasn't making money, they gave them the same amount. Now it's making a lot of money, and so they're arguing the terms of the will, like legally speaking, that the men should be getting more money, and that the person who's working as the warden doesn't deserve all this money because it's a really easy job, and he shouldn't, be making all this money. And there's Tom Towers. He works in the Jupiter, which is a newspaper, and he starts publishing all these stories talking about how Mr. Harding, like, he shouldn't be there. He's, part of the problem, like part of this corruption. And Mr. Harding starts to feel really uncomfortable and really guilty, and feeling like, well, maybe I shouldn't be here. Well, do I have a right to this money? Have I, all these years, has my whole career been for nothing? And it's a very interesting and ethical dilemma that he's put under, and he is personally a very upstanding, very he doesn't rock the boat or anything, but he has very high morals. He's very honest. He would never take anything that he didn't deserve. And it is a great illustration of how it doesn't matter how you feel personally or what you're doing personally. You can be part of a system that is taking advantage of people, and you by default are harming these people. It doesn't matter what you do in your daily life. You could be the nicest person in the world. That's immaterial. That's a secondary thing. And even beyond that, even if he's not the person in charge, will it actually benefit these men? Like, will they actually get extra money? And that's the other layer, is like, well, is it better to have somebody in charge of a corrupt system who is moral? If you can't, like, if it's a given you can't change the system, isn't it better to have somebody who's not, corrupt, like, who actually does care, I should say, than somebody who's just in it for the money? And Anthony Trollope never answers any of these questions because there really isn't a good answer for them. But he does point out, a lot of the corruption within the church at this time, and a lot of the problems that, they're facing, and that, even the most moral people are not going to be able to change a corrupt system. And I think in this day and age, it's such a prescient thing to think about and to talk about it, and to realize that this, it can be comforting sometimes to realize, like, yeah, the world is screwed up and it's always been screwed up, and like, you can feel some camaraderie with, people who have come before. It's sad too, but you can kind of feel like, well, you know, these problems have existed for a long time. And also just to see the how corrupt systems operate. And it's not that everybody in them has bad intentions, but a lot of the actors in them are kind of selfish. And even Harding, he's a good person, but he wants a nice house. He wants, to have nice things. He doesn't think of himself as a poorer person. He doesn't want to be treated that way. And so, Anthony Trollope doesn't get into that a lot at all. But I mean, it's true that, everybody's acting in their best interest throughout. And it's oftentimes the poor people who get sort of labeled as being the selfish ones when they're acting in their best interests. And they kind of chide the poor older men, being like, why do you think you even deserve anything? You're lucky to be here. Like, not Harding, but some of the other people do. And we get a very interesting portrait of Archdeacon Grantley, which improves in later books. So if you read this book, you'll get a very different impression of Grantley, who is Harding's son-in-law, than we do in later books. There is a love story in this one. It's kind of tacked on. It's not really, it's like at the end, like, whoo, yeah. Oh, by the way, these two are gonna get together. I think it could have been developed a lot more in a lot more interesting ways. But I assume that it was sort of either explicitly said, or Anthony Trollope felt that he needed to have some side romance because it was expected. So you definitely get that impression. I kind of appreciate that if you're gonna sort of tack on a romance and not do the best job with it, to like not fill up a lot of the book with it. So I didn't mind that it was sort of rushed at the end. But it was interesting how he handled it. So this is number 1 in the Barsetshire series. It's definitely not as good as Barchester Towers, but I did enjoy it. I liked a lot of the church politics. We get to see sort of behind the scenes during this time. And this also sets the stage with a lot of characters that are going to be revisited in future stories. So definitely, it's the shortest one, so I recommend to read it. You don't have to. Any of these could be standalones. So that's what we have today for the Warden. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Bye.